So Fiona, at the top there, you should have, if you click the chat button down the bottom,
yep,
you'll have a list for panelists and you'll have a list for the attendees.
Okay. I'll just put a message for everyone who's signed on. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be starting soon at 4 o'clock. We've got 4 minutes to go. You can enjoy the lovely surrounds of the ocean. Where did we say it was? Vanuatu with Troy. Maybe the University of Newcastle could supply us with some background music to go with our lovely surrounds that we're watching it.
We don't have a budget for music, just pictures.
Oh.
There's a 10-hour-long Benny Hill on YouTube that you could use.
No, that would be a bad introduction. We've got 7 attendees so far, and our five panelists who are up, or 3 panelists and myself and Troy who are hosting. Welcome to our webinar. We'll be starting very shortly. Please remind any people that you know on Facebook or LinkedIn or your social media that we're happening, and all are welcome to join us. A few more people coming online, 1 minute to go, and we'll be setting off with our webinar today. Thanks all for joining us, and it won't be long till we start. Well, it is 4 o'clock, so I guess we will get things moving. We're going to be recording this, or we are recording this, so that if people haven't been able to join us, they'll be able to watch us later. So welcome to today's webinar. We're pleased to present this special edition on water quality at the Haven, Terrigal and New South Wales water quality objectives. So I'm Fiona Mackay. I'm here to welcome you on behalf of the Hunter Environmental Institute. I'm part of the committee, and we've been very keen to have this talk come, so it's great that we can finally get around to doing it, and this is our first one for the year. So as we gather today virtually, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we live and work. For those of us in Newcastle, where HEI is based mostly, this is the Awabakal people. And for those of us who are visiting us from the Central Coast, that's the Darkinjung people, where our talk is focused today. For those that don't know about HEI, it was established in 1998 to provide a forum for the interaction of people working in environmentally oriented fields in the Hunter region. HEI is a non-profit organisation managed by a committee and operating under a formal constitution. We have regular events like these webinars featuring presentations by guest speakers on specific issues with a range of topics. If you're interested in getting involved with HEI in the committee or suggestions for events, please contact us via the Facebook page or through our website. We'd love to hear from you. Or just sign up for our newsletters, and by attending today, you probably will get on our newsletter list as well. We'd like to extend our thanks to the University of Newcastle for hosting this webinar, and to Troy, who's online helping us with our tech support at the back end, and to our two Gold corporate members, Umwelt and NGH. So on to today's proceedings. Today, as I said, is a presentation on water quality. It's a major concern for residents of the Central Coast, with a popular beach and ocean swimming site at the Haven Terrigal having received a rating of poor in a number of annual State of the Beaches reports. The New South Wales Government and the New Central Coast Council have been working on a number of actions to address water quality at these locations. So today we have three presenters who are going to be sharing with us. First, we have Melanie James, who's the Estuary Management Officer for Central Coast Council. He'll be speaking first up, and then we have Colin Johnson, who's a Senior Scientist with the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment Science Division, and that will be followed by Dr. Rachel Woods, who is a Senior Scientist with New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, who'll discuss the review of the water quality objectives and the department's current engagement campaign. So the presentation is going to go for about 45 minutes, and there'll be a question time at the end where you can put your questions to the panelists, and you can either write them in the chat as we go or hold them up to the end and then ask a question at that point. I ask you all to put your videos off for now and mute. You might already be muted anyway, because probably the university forces you to, but we look forward to these presentations, and I'll hand over to Melanie. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will just quickly share screen. And just loading the slideshow. So whilst that's loading, hi everybody, my name is Melanie James, and yes, I'm the Estuary Management Officer at Central Coast Council. So for the last 2 years, I've been working on water quality and infrastructure investigations at the council, looking at the Terrigal and coastal lagoon areas, as well as a few other places on the Central Coast, seeing what we can do to try to improve water quality. So our section at council is the catchments to coast section, and we look after our estuaries, lagoons, our coastal sites, as well as the urban areas and the agricultural areas. We do wetland restoration, salt marsh restoration, riparian rehabilitation. We build infrastructure such as wetland swales to treat water, gross pollutant traps, as well as boardwalks and community education signage. We work with local landowners to improve their management, and we also talk to the community and do ecological surveys. And one of the major parts of our job is also to do water quality monitoring. So council engages the state government, so Colin and his team, to undertake an ecological monitoring program, and that looks at the state and condition of our waterways across the Central Coast. And council produces a report card every year so that people can track how the water quality changes over time. There's also a Beach Watch water quality monitoring program that council participates in, and that looks at swim safety, and that's what I'll be talking about today. So for anybody outside of our field, so anybody outside of the water quality field, why might we have poor water quality? So we've got urban runoff and stormwater. So from our suburbs, our industrial areas, agricultural areas, we've got nutrients, dirt, chemicals, etc. coming into our waterways. There's also animal waste from wildlife, dogs and livestock. And there's also the potential for human sewage to make it into the environment. And so our swim safety monitoring program is the Beach Watch program run by the state government. So we take the samples, we monitor for a bacteria called enterococci, and that lives in the stomachs of warm-blooded animals. That's an indicator that there might be the presence of either sewage or wildlife feces in the water. And so that data goes to the state government, and each year they produce the State of the Beaches report that tells councils how they're performing and how each beach site is responding to, for example, wet weather. And that's when the major pollution sources often occur. So we came across a problem a few years ago that Terrigal Beach was often rated in the poor category in the State of the Beaches report. And our 4 coastal lagoons, Avoca, Terrigal, Womberall and Cochrane, were also receiving a poor rating. I mean, it's not uncommon for an estuary to receive a poor rating because they're often quite closed off to the ocean and there's a lot of pollution input from suburbs, but it's a very popular location and it was very important to consider that as a part of the audit program. So one of the challenges we faced is that the monitoring doesn't tell us where the source is, so where it's from, is it human or bird? And it doesn't tell us how to fix it. And this is a worldwide issue and there's no hard or fast rule on how to detect or fix the problem. And there are also no government guidelines to help councils out in this journey. And so to start off with, I thought I'd explain the difference between the sewer and stormwater network, just in case anybody hasn't got a background in this. So when we have rainfall in our suburbs, we need to get the water away from our housing. So we have a stormwater network that connects our gutters and the hard surfaces around our buildings. That goes into a pipe network that gets transported straight out to our waterways untreated. But the sewer network, that is a system of pipes that takes the material from our toilets, our showers, kitchen, laundry, into the sewer network, and that gets pumped out along. There are maintenance holes and pump stations, and that moves all of the material, using gravity going downhill, and then pump stations pumping things uphill, up to our treatment plants where they're either treated to a secondary or tertiary level, and then that material is then sent out into our ocean outfalls away from the suburbs, so people don't have to come across the effluent. But there are a number of problems that can occur in the sewer network that cause water quality problems. So one of those is obstructions causing overflows. So say Bob owns this house. He decides he would like some trees and some bushes in his yard and he places them near the sewer pipes and he doesn't realise. Those roots can get down into the sewer network, damaging the pipes, and it can also cause obstructions in the network. Then his wife decides, changing nappies, she's going to pop it down the toilet, or maybe Bob changes the nappies and pops it down the toilet, and then we get overflows and obstructions in the network because of that. So you find that where these obstructions occur, we get an overflow of sewer out into the environment. And the reason it's done like this is the maintenance holes are designed to lift an overflow when these problems occur so that it doesn't come back up into your house and cause health risks from being exposed to the sewer network. Then there are also cracked or collapsed pipes. So a little bit of underground movement or maybe some construction. Someone didn't do a dial before they dug whilst doing construction. That can cause damage to pipes and that can leak into the groundwater or allow the sewage to get out into stormwater. And there's also the issue when that occurs that the rainwater gets into the stormwater pipes and that can cause overflows downstream. So the maintenance holes and the pump station can, have overflows. There's also issues of cracked manholes where water gets in there too. And so the sewer network isn't designed to take rainwater. It's designed to take the sewage from houses and properties that exist, as well as an expanded capacity for those that will be developed in the future, and to deliver that to the treatment plant. It's not designed to take copious amounts of rainwater, so that's why these overflows occur. Then there are also the major issues of illegal connections. So if your gutters and hard surfaces, rather than connecting to the stormwater network, connect down into the sewer network, that then causes overflows in the catchment. And then the other illegal connection that we can find is that the sewer network is connected instead to the stormwater network. And that means that the sewage goes directly out into the environment. And so I thought I'd show you a quick picture if you're not too familiar with Terrigal. It's very, very developed. We've got lots of multi-storey buildings. It's very, very popular, lots of restaurants and cafes, lots of swimmers. There's our coastal lagoons, which are very, very close to Terrigal. So this is Avoca here, and then to the north there's Terrigal and Womberall, and Cochrane Lagoon is to the south. And these places are frequented by our community and by visitors for, secondary recreation such as kayaking or splashing and playing in sand, or direct physical contact with water such as swimming. But we're still left with this problem. We don't know whether it's from animals, or whether it's the sewer network that's experiencing problems. So we put together a large and diverse team with varying skills. So we were very, very lucky to have a partnership with the state government. So the environmental scientists at council and the state government got together and engaged the microbial research scientists from UTS and the stormwater and sewer engineers at council, as well as maintenance staff, compliance officers, and admin and communications and managerial support. So we had a huge, diverse team that could help out. And the main aim of this was to develop an investigation process that could identify issues and improve recreational water quality. And one of the main aims too was also to make this applicable to other areas. So we wanted this to be able to be used as a starting process for other councils across New South Wales or Australia. And so this is a rather complex flow chart. I won't go into it too much, but basically it shows the different responsibilities for council or for state government, or joint responsibilities throughout the program with the key milestones. But there were three main phases that I'll walk you through right now in a minute. So if you can imagine, this is our receiving waters, so any kind of ocean, lake or estuary. The first thing we needed to do was to assess the water quality and to see what people were experiencing when they were swimming. So what areas on the beach were good or bad to swim, and then to assess any kind of stormwater pipe. So if this black stick figure represents our stormwater network, we could tell which ones were bad and which ones were good. And then from there, systematically sampling up through the stormwater network to see where the hotspots of pollution were coming from. And that gave us a really good indicator of where we needed to do network investigations. And so through phase one, it was developing an understanding of the beach and water quality. We looked at enterococci to assess swim safety. And we sampled all the way along the beach system. And what we found is that during dry weather, water quality was generally pretty good. It was in the good category, except for straight outside the main stormwater drains. In wet weather, as you would expect, you've got more pollution being flushed down into the system. Right outside the stormwater drains, it's not great to swim, and a little further to the north. And you can also see down here when the lagoon opens, so this is Terrigal Lagoon here, when it opens onto the beach, you can see water quality is relatively poor as it moves across the beach. And the idea was to be able to provide a graph like this for community members to use so that they could decide where on the beach they'd like to swim. Then we started sampling in the stormwater network, looking for enterococci and trace pharmaceuticals. So we looked at trace pharmaceuticals because it's an indicator that the sewage is getting into the stormwater. And Colin Johnson later on will talk about the DNA analysis. There's also the catchment sampling. So after you've assessed each pipe, you systematically go up through the catchment. We looked at enterococci and DNA, but that process will be talked about by Colin. And in the next phase is the really, really interesting phase for me. It's figuring out what the problem was. So we did a lot of CCTV work through Terrigal and Terrigal Lagoon. So CCTV cameras, sending them down the pipes, looking for cracks and looking for water getting into the system where it shouldn't be. Using dye to put it down the sewer network so that if it came out in the stormwater network, you would know that there was an illegal connection from the sewer to the stormwater network. And then there's smoke testing that you can use to detect whether or not there's an illegal connection from your gutters into the sewer network. And the way that works is if you pump the smoke into the sewer network, that illegal connection to your gutters, the smoke travels through that and up through your gutters or through any kind of gully in your backyard. And then council compliance officers walk through the streets, take photographs, take records, and then actions are taken from there. So the process to clean the sewer network and fix all the problems include a relining process. So when you have a cracked pipe, it's very, very expensive to dig those up and replace them. It's a huge cost, but modern technologies have allowed us to use a relining process. So the relining process is a bit like a slinky. So you form the plastic material into the correct shape of the pipe to fit inside the old pipe. So you slide that material in, fix it and seal it on either end of the pipe, and then that makes a 50+ year life expectancy for that pipe moving into the future. There are also processes that council can take to ensure that private residences that are illegally connected fix up their network. So we've had a huge level of success so far with the program. It's been a big whirlwind effort to get it going, and then a whirlwind effort to keep it moving. But we've got around 51 kilometres of pipes so far have been CCTV'd, which is a huge effort. Of that 51 kilometres, 17.2 kilometres have needed upgrades. So that just indicates that the sewer network is ageing. There are cracks, there are problems in the network, and relining is really a huge part of the remediation process. We've inspected over 1,276 manholes by now, and that means looking for potential overflows, looking for any cracks, any way that water might get into those manholes. And we've inspected 684 private properties, and that number is rising. We found 15 illegal connections that have been dealt with to date, and there are going to be up to potentially 30 recent ones that we've found. And so in conclusion, there's been no silver bullet to fix this problem. Often people wanted to know what the problem was. Can't you just get in and fix it? And that's a fair question. But what we found is it's not just one problem in the network that we're facing. It's many, many different issues, and it needs a diverse team of staff to approach the issue. And we've been really, really lucky to have the state government, and the partnership with them has been crucial to the success of the program. And we've seen considerable progress to date, and progress will continue. And if you're interested in more information, feel free to go to our website, yourvoiceourcoast.com/TCLA. Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie. That was great. And I understand that Colin will be coming next and providing further information to follow on from Melanie. Thanks, Colin.
Okay, I hope you can all see that. So just carrying on from Melanie, and I apologise where I am a little bit repetitive with some of the stuff that she's already shared with you. As she mentioned, there was a large number of people involved in this project, from both the state government, from UTS, and from council, and it's been a real joint exercise to get this far.
Colin, we can't see a presentation as yet. Here it comes.
Sorry, I'm not sure what happened there. You can see it now.
Yes, all good, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so just as Melanie mentioned, this really stemmed from a history of poor beach watch ratings, looking at fecal indicator bacteria in particularly Terrigal Beach, but also in Central Coast lagoons, along with ecological health ratings from our statewide estuary health monitoring program, which again returned poor ratings for Terrigal and Avoca lagoons. So we knew that there was a pollution issue, but really it's about a number of questions. So our overall objective was to identify the sources of the pollution to Terrigal Bay and the Central Coast lagoons and find priority sites for remediation. So we wanted to know, firstly, what pollution was present, where it was a problem, and where it was coming from. And from that to then determine what the management priorities are. I won't even talk about this because Melanie kind of covered it to a degree, but essentially we are now here at this point with what's left over being those real more detailed remediation steps and defining exactly what the problem is in the locations that we've identified. So to start with, we want to know what pollution is present. So the Beach Watch program has identified that we have a fecal contamination problem, but the issue with that is it's reliant on enterococci, and they can come from any warm-blooded animal. So to examine this, we work with UTS to look at the genomics of other fecal indicator bacteria that are more specific to particular host organisms. Other potential pollutants that we had an interest in looking at were turbidity, which is a big community concern, the actual clarity of the water, how aesthetically nice it is to swim in, and whether or not it just looks dirty. And this can come from suspended sediments or microalgae. And we also wanted to look at whether or not there are other potential toxicants in the water. So there are a number of steps to this. So to begin with, looking at the fecal contamination that we knew was there, we looked at a program of water quality sampling from paired sites at the drains and in the receiving waters, and also stratified samples offshore throughout the bay and as far as North Avoca Beach to the south and Foresters Beach to the north as control sites that would be unimpacted by any issues in the Terrigal Bay area. And these sites were, these water samples were then filtered and qPCR conducted on the 16S bacterial sequence, and a number of host-specific assays used to look at potential source organisms for the fecal contamination. So we looked at 3 assays for human feces, 1 for dogs, 1 for birds, and 1 for generalized infrastructure. So the major findings of this, in the first instance, was a refinement of those microbiological markers. So for humans, we've dropped it down from 3 potential assays to 2, continued with the dog and bird, and now reduced the generalized wastewater to just 1, the interferon. Overall, water quality was typically good in the swimming waters in dry weather, but within the flowing stormwater drains, particularly in the Haven and in the main outlet for Terrigal Bowl, they were contaminated with human sewage even in dry weather. But this was insufficient to really impact the swimming waters. In contrast, in wet weather, the sewage signature was significantly higher in both the stormwater outlets and was easily detectable within the adjacent swimming waters and in the Terrigal Lagoon and the lagoon outflow. Looking at other pollutants, we relied on sediment survey. This allowed us to look at longer term and chronic pollution rather than things that could easily be missed in instantaneous water samples. Mainly here we're looking at urban runoff and runoff from roads in the Terrigal area. So things like pesticides, herbicides, metals and nutrients. We took grab samples from 42 sites from south of Avoca up to Dewey Bay, north of Womberal, and conducted 73 different analyses. Overall, we found no evidence of harmful contaminants accumulating in the Terrigal Bay sediments. Most of the things that we looked for, we didn't even detect. There are only 33 things that we actually found at all, and only 1 of them was in excess of the low trigger values, ANZAC trigger values, and this was well below the high trigger values. And due to its conformation with other co-occurring sediment chemicals, it's the arsenic that we found, which is the chemical that this applied to, was not from an anthropogenic source, but rather a natural part of that environment in that portion of Avoca Bay. And again, being in Avoca, it was certainly not part of the Terrigal issue. The one thing we did find was an area of relative enrichment in fine sediments in southern Terrigal Bay and in the Haven. And that's likely to be one of the contributors to turbidity, which was the other sort of big community concern. So looking at the turbidity itself, we included this in another survey that we did, looking at 9 transects from north of Oka to Foresters Beach at the surf zone at 5 metres and 10 metres depth, looking at physicochemistry, turbidity and chlorophyll levels. We also set up a turbidity monitoring program in the haven itself, with surface and seabed turbidity logging, and also organised some of the swimmers to take regular observations of water clarity for us and rate them themselves as from very dirty to very clear. And this was then correlated with sea state and with regional satellite imagery for chlorophyll A as a indication of phytoplankton abundance. And the major findings of this, we had 2 major causes of turbidity. We had microalgae and suspended sediments, as we knew. The microalgae, there was no evidence of a chronic algal bloom or of nutrient enrichment within Terrigal Bay itself. Rather, it really looks like when we saw high levels of turbidity due to that microalgae, it was just a function of a general accumulation of phytoplankton along the coastline, which you can see over in the satellite imagery, all along the New South Wales coast, and also a function of the way the currents work in this area, where a general northwest stream current just teases off small portions which temporarily accumulate in the haven area. And I'll get to that a little bit later with the current modelling. But the major cause appears to be the suspended sediments. So the observed poor water clarity was coincident or following high wave action. And this is further reinforced by our surface and seabed turbidity logging, which showed that the turbidity was typically higher at the seafloor than at the surface. So it's the resuspension of those sediments, those fine sediments that we found in our sediment sampling, that is really driving that turbidity. And in response to that wave action, we see a rapid turbidity increase, but it's much slower to decline even once that wave action returns to lower levels. So we now know what the pollution is. So the next stage was to work out when and where it's a problem. And to look at this, these are our water quality sampling sites. So we had paired drain outlet and receiving water sites, sampling in wet and dry weather. And these are our transects going offshore as well at that surf zone, 5 metre and 10 metre depth, ranging from north of Oka in the south up to Foresters Beach in the north. And in addition to the physicochemistry, nutrients and chlorophyll at these sites and turbidity, we also took enterococci samples and the bacterial genomic samples. And what we found here really was that the main driver of the bacterial pollution or the fecal pollution into Terrigal Bay was human, although we did see some evidence of bird and dog inputs. It was the human sewage that was the main driver. This was primarily coming from the Terrigal Lagoon during rainfall, and to a lesser degree from the Seven Drains outlet, the main Terrigal bowl outlet in southern Terrigal Bay. However, the bacterial pollution in particular was largely confined to the nearshore zone, so it wasn't really extending out. But unfortunately, it's that nearshore zone that every single swimmer has to travel through, even if they're swimming offshore. The other major thing was that this enterococci was being removed quite rapidly, and so that fecal contamination was decreasing back to baseline levels within those 3 days. To have a better look at exactly what was happening with this in these receiving waters, created a circulation model of the water currents in the Terrigal Bay region to determine the fate of the pollutions and their residence time within Terrigal Bay and the Haven. So this relied on wave data from the MHL wave rider buoys, LiDAR seafloor mapping, as well as some in situ monitoring of currents and physicochemistry, and use of current tracking drogues. So this little video, which I hope is working, shows the general current patterns found in Terrigal Bay in most conditions. So this is this region has its current circulation primarily driven by waves, and in northeasterly to southeasterly swells, so basically everything but southerly. We see a large eddy in the southern region of Terrigal Bay, north of the Haven, in this kind of region here, as well as smaller eddies within the Haven itself. And these tease water off this general northwesterly stream, suck it back into the southern Terrigal Bay, and then spit it back out again. In a southerly swell, that large southern Terrigal Bay eddy breaks down, but those smaller Haven eddies are still present. The actual input from the drains was much smaller than that from the lagoon. So in terms of its impact on the bay as a whole, the drains have a smaller impact than the lagoons, and their output is a lot smaller than that from either the lagoon drainage or the current circulation that's coming up the coast. Particle tracking associated with this model has shown that in most conditions, the vast majority, over 70% of the particles, will be removed from the Haven in about 5 hours. But in the southerly, because of that breakdown of that bigger southern Terrigal Bay eddy, it increases to about 20 hours. And regardless of conditions, some of those particles are still retained though, with somewhere a little bit below 10% or around 10% are retained regardless of swell conditions, even after 40 hours. Within the lagoons, we had a monthly sampling program from August to July, looking at 5 sites in Womberall, Terrigal and Cochrane, and 7 in Avoca lagoons, Avoca being the ecologically health-wise the worst, but also the most complicated in terms of its shape, and the largest of the 4 lagoons, hence the extra sites. In all cases, site 5 was the major swimming location at the mouth and the one monitored by Beachwatch, so you can see there. At each of these sites, we measured the physicochemistry and also collected samples for suspended solids, chlorophyll and nutrients, as well as enterococci and bacterial genomic samples to look at enterococcal sources. And the major findings of this, in common with the Terrigal Bay, the water quality in all the lagoons was generally fine for swimming in dry weather, but it was a different case in wet weather. So in Cochrane and Womberall lagoons, water quality was typically good, and the enterococci levels were largely driven by animal inputs when they were high. Though in the case of Womberall, there is some human input up in the top of Foresters Creek. In contrast, both Terrigal and Avoca lagoons are quite significantly impacted by sewage contamination in wet weather. So the next thing we really wanted to look at was where the sources are. And to do this involved taking, we largely relied on enterococci samples going back up the stormwater network during wet weather events. Had to be during wet weather events. Firstly, that's when the problem was at its worst, but also stormwater. There's not a lot of water there when it's not raining. So we did progressive sampling upstream from the drain outlets to limit it to smaller and smaller subcatchments. And these were then giving a priority rating according to the average enterococci concentrations. So just to quickly show you what I mean by this. So say we have a sample point here. That's going to indicate that somewhere upstream of it, we have a problem. So then to refine that, we go up to a junction and sample on both points of the junction where we can. Alternatively, we may not be able to do that. So for some reason, we may not be able to sample at both points, but we can eliminate one branch. Or there's a whole lot of other variations on that. In addition to just the enterococci concentrations, we also installed a number of flow meters and auto samplers to allow sampling of enterococci throughout the hydrograph during flood events, and also to give us an idea of just how much input is coming from these drains down into the bay, and to allow us to calculate enterococci loads for individual subcatchments and determine how significant each one is in terms of its impact on receiving waters. So from all of this, we're able to generate these maps. And these are really priority maps for further investigations. So those investigations Mel was talking about, looking at the specific causes. So they're looking for cracked pipes in these regions, looking for illegal connections, blockages, all the things that could be causing problems in the sewer network that are going to then translate to high enterococci levels within the stormwater network. So we have two different maps here. The moderate wet weather is based on between 6 and 7 wet weather events over the course of a year, and the extreme wet weather is just the single very severe wet weather event roughly a year ago in February last year. I think it might even be exactly a year ago. I think it was the 17th. So when there was wide-scale flooding. And you can see that as a result of that flooding, we saw much larger areas that were highly impacted by sewage intrusion. But generally speaking, we're looking at these red areas as priorities for further investigation to determine exactly where that pollution is coming from and allow it to be fixed. I need to also note, though, that much of the Terrigal bowl remediation in particular has been conducted since this sampling. If anyone's interested in further information on any of these, all of the technical summary reports are on the are online on the New South Wales Government website. And there's 10 of them for you to have a look at, as well as a report on remediation progress from the council. Although that would be a little bit out of date now. Things are moving forward a lot faster. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Colin. It's great to hear all that information, and there's a few questions that have been coming through. So if you've got any questions, put them in the Q&A so that we can answer them at the end and direct it to, say who you're directing it to. That would be helpful too. Our next speaker is Rachel Woods. Dr. Rachel Woods, can you take away?
Hopefully you can see my screen.
We can see it hasn't gone to the main display yet.
Here we go.
That's it. Thank you.
Hi, so as was mentioned, my name is Rachel Woods. I'm a senior scientist in the place-based science team with the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment. As part of the Science, Economics and Science Division, I'm working to deliver an action underneath the Marine Estate Management Strategy to review the New South Wales water quality objectives. So the talk that I'm going to be giving today is on a little bit of a different topic that has been discussed about Terrigal, but it's definitely related in terms of setting those water quality objectives and aiming to meet community values and uses of waterways. So I guess I'll just begin with a little bit of background on the New South Wales Marine Estate Management Strategy. It was released in 2018 by the New South Wales State Government and outlines how to protect and enhance our waterways, coastline and estuaries over the next 10 years. Under Initiative 1, our team in Place-Based Science is working to review the New South Wales water quality objectives for each catchment in coastal New South Wales, and this covers 184 catchments. This work aligns with a range of water quality actions underneath the Marine Estate Management Strategy, and specifically the application of the risk-based framework. So I guess to begin, I'll start by talking about what the New South Wales water quality objectives are. So they're the long-term goals and current standard for water quality in waterways across New South Wales, and this is based on community environmental values and uses. The objectives were developed based on existing principles and guidelines as recommended in the National Water Quality Management Strategy, which was adopted in 1992. The water quality objectives provide guidance on water quality in a range of acts and policies, and they can also be used to achieve a guideline for a water quality outcome in a specific waterway. In terms of what the water quality objectives are in a bit more detail, they're composed of 3 core components. The first, as I mentioned, is that community environmental value and use. And the one that's applied to the entire state is the protection of aquatic ecosystems. The second component are the biological or physiochemical indicators used to determine if water quality supports the environmental value. And finally, the numerical criteria or descriptive criteria that sets the water quality required to support that environmental value. The most commonly recognised objective of a waterway would be something like primary contact recreation or swimming, where you have a number of indicators and numerical criteria that ensure human health standards are maintained. So why are we reviewing the New South Wales water quality objectives? Well, in developing the Marine Estate Management Strategy, the New South Wales Government underwent a thorough threat and risk assessment to determine all of the major threats and risks to the marine estate. And through this process, feedback was received on the use of the New South Wales water quality objectives. This feedback included that the objectives were old and outdated and that they were developed 20 years ago, that significant land use change had occurred throughout that time, and that the indicators and numerical criteria had not been developed into locally or regionally specific objectives, which was the original intention. So with all of this information in mind, our team has been reviewing and exploring what we can do to better achieve the New South Wales water quality objectives by first looking at the extent of land use change, the location of important waterways and important ecosystems in different waterways, confirming that if the range of values and uses remain relevant and really meet what the community wants, and also to make sure that the indicators and numerical criteria, as previously stated, are actually meeting local community and local council needs as they're being applied. Today, for today's talk, I'm going to be focusing on the first component, which are the New South Wales community values and uses that sit underneath the water quality objectives. At the moment, there are 12 community values and uses, and these can range from the protection of aquatic ecosystems that, as I mentioned, is applied to the entire state, through to recreational activities, drinking water, as well as agricultural water supply. At present, we are live with an engagement campaign to review the community values and uses, and this is occurring across all 184 coastal catchments. This work was originally scoped at the end of 2018. However, as I'm sure we've all experienced, and probably why this seminar is happening online, a number of delays have occurred, which has meant that the engagement campaign wasn't actually released until the end of 2020. This engagement campaign includes an online survey and targeted social media campaign, as well as a package of materials that can be provided to local councils and other organisations to help promote this review. What I'm going to do now, though, is I'm going to hopefully this will work. I'm going to click on this link here, and hopefully you can all still see my screen. And I'm going to take you through what the objectives what the survey actually looks like online. And based on today's talk, I'm going to take us to the Central Coast Council, Central Coast survey. So basically you'll be directed to this website. You can then select one or any of the different surveys that are available, and it can then take you into the survey.
Rachel, we're not seeing anything at the moment. We're just seeing your page that said engagement campaign.
Okay, let me see.
It worked before.
Yeah, it did work before. Maybe I need to click. Here we go. Is this now working?
That's working, thank you.
Fantastic. So the link I originally clicked on will take you here. So this is our landing page on the New South Wales Government website, and you can see there are a number of different surveys here. What I've selected though is our Central Coast survey. There's a bit of information here, but basically I'll step you through the process. It asks a range of demographic questions, so I'll quickly skip through these. I'm sure everyone knows how to answer these. There's a question here where you can add in your information if you'd like to be contacted as we continue with the survey and ask some more detailed questions later on. But I guess this is the bit where it can get a little bit tricky. So what the survey asks you is if you know the postcode of the waterway that you're interested in telling us about. So this might be a waterway that's in your local government area, so you might know the postcode really well. And if you do, you can select yes down here. For today, again, based on what we saw with Terrigal, I'm going to be selecting this postcode. It's then going to tell me which catchment I live in. So you can see here it's telling me that this is the range of catchments that I might be located in, and it gives me a list of one of the waterways that I can select that I most want to tell the survey about and give feedback on. So you can see Terrigal Beach is here, Terrigal Lagoon is here. If I don't know my postcode though that my waterway is located in, which I'm sure many people won't if you're giving information about a place that you like to holiday to, or potentially it's just, you know, not the postcode that you know every day that is your current address, you can select no. And then you'll be directed to this other page, which will take you to this map here. So you can select this map. Hopefully you can still all see this. This will load all of the waterways within kind of the Central Coast area. So you can see Sydney down to the south and the Hunter River up to the north. You can then use this map like you would any normal Google Maps. You can move around and zoom in and out using the scroll. So if I want to scroll into Terrigal here, or maybe I want to scroll in to somewhere slightly north of Terrigal, I can then click on one of these waterways that are marked, and it will tell me the exact name of this waterway, which is really important when we're filling in this survey so that we know exactly where you're talking about. You can then head back to the survey page and type in what your waterway is, potentially give us a little bit more information if you can, select next, and you can continue through the survey. So that way you can either enter your postcode or do it using the interactive map. The survey then takes you through a number of different questions that ask what you like about your waterway and what you value about it. It asks about if there's anything stopping you from using your waterway, which can include things like, you know, water quality and other issues, how close you live to that particular waterway, how regularly you visit that particular waterway. This question asks about conflicting uses, as well as any activities that you'd like to use in the future. And this is a really important component of the water quality objectives, that it looks at those aspirational objectives as well. There are a couple more questions here that go into kind of you know, a ranking of different factors that are important to you. But then this last question is probably of most important to a lot of people. As part of our survey, we actually have an incentive where you can win one of 10 National Parks multi-passes, where if you just fill in this survey and tell us in 25 words or less what your favourite waterway memory is in New South Wales, you can go in the draw to win one of those National Parks passes. You can then continue on and submit your answer here. What I'll do now, hopefully, is be able to jump back into my presentation. Hopefully this is, you can see this screen again. I'll just jump to where I was before. Hopefully this is all clear to everyone. But basically, I thought now I'd run through some of the results that we're seeing for the Hunter and Central Coast region so far. So the survey's been open since the end of December last year. And so far, we've received over 570 results for the Hunter and Central Coast regions. This has covered all of the demographic ranges with the highest concentration of responses from 36 to 55-year-olds and 56 to 75-year-olds. We've also been able to confirm that all community values and uses remain relevant for a number of different waterways within these two areas. What this means is that basically we can see that key swimming sites, beautiful beaches along this area, have remained, highly prized places to go for that primary and secondary recreation. We can also see that other waterways like the Hunter River, which experience a lot of pressure from agricultural, industrial and recreational activities, really do meet that broad spectrum of community values and uses, including things like livestock and irrigation purposes, which is fantastic to see. We're also seeing that really the most important value that the community has so far is the ability to support wildlife and plants, as well as the ability to support leisure and recreation activities. So all of this information coming in so far is fantastic to see, and also fantastic to see that the objectives are still relevant today. As I mentioned, we also launched a social media campaign. This was launched at the beginning of February this year, and this has been through Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. At the moment, we've been seeing a great response, and you can see on the screen here some examples of what these ads can look like to attract attention to actually fill in the survey. Again, you can see some quotes here from the comments. We're getting some great feedback, which is fantastic, and we can really see that people really do value waterways across New South Wales. In terms of what this information is going to be used for, I thought I might just quickly run through why this information is important to be gathered and the uses that this can have, particularly for local councils. So, a number of things that local councils have to do include local strategic planning. Basically, through the process of updating and reviewing the New South Wales water quality objectives, we can provide a line of sight from regional planning into local strategic planning statements, all the way through to LEPs and DCPs. On the screen here, we have an example of the Northern Beaches Council and their inclusion of their community values and uses into their recently developed local strategic planning statement. And this information, again, will be able to flow through into their LEP and DCP as these are updated. Councils are also in the process of developing coastal management programs as set out by the Coastal Management Manual. And stage one of developing a coastal management program relates to understanding community values and uses of waterways in the coastal environment. So again, the information gathered through this survey will really assist councils in this information that they need to be able to develop a CMP. The 5 steps of CMP development also follow the risk-based framework for considering waterway health. And so again, within the survey material that we're developing, this will also help in the application of the risk-based framework. This works to hopefully work with councils to develop locally and regionally specific waterway objectives. And this can again help to meet those community values and uses of what the community really wants to use their waterways for. These objectives can then be used as a guideline or a benchmark, such as through the New South Wales Government Water Quality Report Card program, to improve water quality where needed and meet those community values and uses. So as you can see, there's quite a continuum of different programs that this information will hopefully assist with. Through the review and update of the water quality objectives, we also plan to develop an online mapping tool through the New South Wales Government Seed portal, which will enable easy access to multiple data layers. These layers will include the newly obtained community values and uses, as well as high ecological value systems, impervious layers, and many more mapping layers that then can be accessed by local council and also by the community who'd like to access this data. In terms of what I'm, hoping to ask and get from everyone who's listening today, is that we really encourage all attendees to fill in the survey. Please also tell your colleagues, friends and family about the survey and what's happening. At the moment for the Hunter and Central, we can see that a lot of the information that's coming through is really concentrated towards the coast. And there are a number of catchments that are further up, a little bit further inland, that would be great to access data for. As I mentioned, we're also looking to review the numerical component of the water quality objectives. And in order to do this, we need to basically collect as much numerical water quality data as we possibly can for any coastal catchments within New South Wales. This data that is collected will then be shared with councils as we work with them to develop locally or regionally specific waterway objectives. This numerical data can be water quality data, but it can also be any reports or report cards that describe any numerical criteria and indicators. And I'd love for anyone to contact me if they do have any of these kind of data sets available. I'm also happy to receive feedback either today or via email on the best ways to reach out to your local communities. If you're a member of a kayaking club or something similar and you think that your community would be interested, please reach out to me and let me know. I can send you through that package of materials to help engage them, or also potentially set up something similar to this where I can talk you through how to actually fill in the survey. That's all from me today. I just wanted to acknowledge and thank all the many collaborators that we have here, and particularly, you know, the work that's being done underneath the Marine Estate Management Strategy. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, please let me know.
Thanks so much, Rachel. I can see lots of questions coming through for the panelists. Some of them have already been answered, and you might be able to see there is a response there, but we'll also go through some of those. So if you want to hang on for a bit, because I know there's only 4 minutes left of the hour, but hey, we can stay on a bit longer and learn some more as we go. So we've got some questions in the Q&A. So Isaac asked early on, so that was probably to Melanie, with the illegal connections, what leads to these? Is it home handy jobs who don't really know what they're doing, or is it shonky tradies just trying to make a quick buck?
Hi, it's a bit of both. So we found so far that you know, most people don't seem aware of the problems in the network. You know, local residents are surprised, but stories have been coming in from other residents that they've known shonky dealings, and it's cheaper to just connect it to the stormwater network rather than the sewer network. So, you know, it's all a bit of a hearsay, but in general, it's believed sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it's not. So you were right.
Thanks very much, Melanie. One more in the Q&A. This is probably for Rachel. Were the samples from the Terrigal audit ever analysed for human drugs or pharmaceutical products? This is from Namala in Central Coast Council, lab technician.
That one might be for Colin, actually. Do you have an answer to that one, Colin?
That one might be for me. So trace pharmaceutical testing in the stormwater network.
The samples for the Terrigal audit, yeah.
Yeah, so that was one of the original sampling sort of that we did at Terrigal. So when we started the audit, we did enterococci and trace pharmaceuticals, and we did find caffeine, ibuprofen, Panadol, things like that in the stormwater network, which was the first indicator that we did have a problem, but we needed something a bit more robust. That's why Colin and the team went and did DNA. And it's also really important to acknowledge that there's no real thresholds for some of these indicators. It's not like enterococci in the ocean where you've got, you know, state guidelines that sort of say, or actually national guidelines which say what level you can get in the water until it becomes more of a health risk. For trace pharmaceuticals and DNA, there aren't those thresholds to tell you what's safe or what's not. So yes, we did do trace pharmaceuticals, but it's not always the best indicator.
Thanks very much, Melanie. Hopefully that answered your question. Okay, so Craig has asked, I've heard you mention stormwater as a potential source of contamination. Have you done any work to look at what is collecting in the drains, the nutrient loads, sediments, hydrocarbons, and heavy metals? I know Craig also wants to connect with the panelists later, so we'll get in touch with you about that.
I think this one's for Colin, maybe.
Yes, sorry, I'm just trying to see the question so I can read it because there was.
That's in the chat.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find it.
Yeah, 427.
Oh, too far down. There we go. Go right back. Okay. So you mean in terms of the drains, what's collecting in the drains themselves, or what's coming out of the drains? I'm not entirely sure. So
what is collecting in the drains, it says. So
yeah. So really we've been looking at the water coming through the drains, not any sediments and things that are actually in the drains themselves. Typically they get flushed out when there's a decent amount of rain. There has been a couple of cases in the really low gradient portions of Terrigal Bowl where sediments have accumulated, and I believe some of them have been cleaned out just to increase the efficiency of water removal, but it's not a major priority. In terms of the actual loads of nutrients coming out of the stormwater, we have taken levels of nutrients coming out of them regularly with our other samples, and there's nothing particularly worrying there, I guess, is the real upshoot. I can't give you exact figures, but there's no nothing that raised any flags. In terms of the metals and those other sorts of things, that's really what we're looking at the sediment samples for. So when we did our sediment survey, the near shore samples were sited adjacent to drain outfalls. So anything actually coming out would pick that up. And the idea of those sediment samples is to pick up things like heavy metals that are coming out from those drains. And as I mentioned in my presentation, we didn't find anything to indicate any issues with any of that form of pollution. Really, the only thing that we found that was significant was the bacterial pollution coming out with the water. So nothing chronic other than that fecal indicator stuff and associated slightly elevated nutrient levels.
Thanks, Colin. There was a question from Margaret about what do the colours mean on the lagoon stormwater maps, and the response was that they represent priorities for investigation based on enterococci concentrations in stormwater going from green with low priority to red in high priority. So hopefully that answers your question, Margaret.
I'm afraid I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what the concentration levels were, and I removed that from the slide because it made it harder to see what was going on. But if you want a lot of detail on that, I can get back to you, or alternatively, you can jump on the website and look at the reports, which are all there.
Okay, another question from Molly this time. Does Central Coast Council have a water quality target in Terrigal Bay post sewer network remediation works?
I did actually respond to that.
Do you want to talk to it?
Yeah, I just really said the idea is to come up with a good beach watch score, which means that the target level is to be less than 41 enterococci per 100 mils, which corresponds to a good rating for swimming water quality and a very low risk to swimmers.
She's also asked a follow-on question. Thanks, Molly. Has there been any results indicating success in sewer network remediation?
I might answer a little bit to that one. I popped an answer up in the box. So the State of the Beaches report has shown that Terrigal returned to the good category 2 years ago. So it's 2 years in a row now that we've had Terrigal in the good category. And the main works that had started at that point were, and one of the causes of sewer network issues that I didn't really cover is the fatbergs that can be caused by restaurants. So the grease traps in restaurants, we had some new push from our staff to go and actually monitor those, make sure the fats weren't getting in. And after that, the sewer network remediation started. So we have seen the State of the Beaches report improve, but I think really to prove that long term, we'd want to look at our data that we've collected through the audit and do a bit of a before after control impact study to see whether or not the water quality is improved. And depending resources and availability of staff, that's something we might look into in the future.
Excellent. Just checking any other questions that have come up. Margaret's asked, is there any liaising with Waterwatch and CN for more water quality data and long-term sets?
I'm guessing that one's for me. No, I haven't actually liaised with them. So yeah, if anyone has any contacts, that would be fantastic. Yeah, we'd love to get as much data as possible.
Fantastic. And I can see you posted the link to the survey, so we can all get on there very easily.
I'm just about to chuck the link up for our reports. And the other thing I was going to say is if anyone is interested in long-term water quality data sets, and Rachel would already know about this, but all of our estuary water quality stuff from 2007 to 2020 is currently available on SEED. And there's a fair whack of data there.
So to all the panelists, if anyone wants to get in touch with you to follow up some further information that they might have, is there a particular way? Rachel's put up her contact details before. Is there any other way for the Central Coast people and others to be contacted, or would you rather us just forward them from the HEI website or from their Facebook?
The Your Voice Our Coast link that Mel put up, I believe still has my contact details on it, and I'm pretty sure it's still got Mel's.
Fantastic. Okay,
Yeah,
well,
I'm
thank
happy
you
for
very
people
much.
to email
That's
me
great.
directly.
Yeah, me too.
And
There you go. Personal contacts. Fantastic. Well, it's fantastic to hear about your great work. And I haven't asked if anybody wants to raise a question right now, but I've allowed you to put in the chat. I think we need to probably finish up for now, but if you have got more questions, please feel free to contact our panelists. But I'd like to thank all of them for their presentations today. It's been fantastic. I think it's run pretty smoothly, which is great. And it's in this COVID environment to be able to have this opportunity to join in from wherever we are. And it seems like we've got people from all over the country. We have over 38 participants as well as the panelists. So thank you all for coming along. So on behalf of HEI, I'd like to thank you for coming, and also to invite you to our next seminar that we'll be having, which is a very exciting one. It'll be coming straight from Bulgaria. We have Dr. Dragomir Garbov, who will be coming and presenting. I'm going to show you what it looks like, so you might be excited by it. That coming through.
Yep, we can see that.
Excellent. So Drago is involved in the MAP project, which is involved in marine archaeology surveys in the Black Sea. And currently, if you want to get an idea of what it will be about, if you can go on to SBS On Demand, you can see the TV series documentary that he's featured in as well. So that's available to you now. You want to have a look at that, but he'll be coming talking to us live. He's coming back to Australia. He lives in Newcastle, but he has been doing a lot of work overseas and is hoping to be back soon after that. So that's on the 10th of March, and you can log in soon and register that soon. The link will be available very shortly, and there'll be an email going out about that. And we also would like to thank then all of our sponsors. So Hunter Environmental Institute has brought this today, but not without the help of our friends at the University of Newcastle. Thank you very much to Troy for his help, and for Ryan and the others in the background. We thank our gold sponsors. So we've got Umwelt and NGH. Thank you to them as well, and to our presenters. And thank you all for coming, because without you, we won't have a webinar. So we'll be having further events coming up. We hope you can join us. And if you've got any questions, please put something on our Facebook, share it with your friends, your colleagues. This is something that people from all over the place can join in, even from Bulgaria. So we hope to see you next time, and thanks for joining us. Bye.